Hey guys, thanks for dropping by the NFN Radio News Podcast, where we talk a little politics with a little lean to the left, and where we interview interesting guests who can add to our dialogue. Today we have with us Kim Curry, author of The Death of Fairness, a book that explores the aftermath of the 1986 decision by the Federal Communications Commission to rescind the Fairness Doctrine. With that action, broadcasters no longer are required to present contrasting points of view on their airwaves, and Curry believes that's one reason why our nation is so politically and socially divided today. So, hey, welcome, Kim. Thanks for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks,
and
Bob,
about the death of fairness.
I'm a 33-year broadcaster, was on the radio and programmed in different cities around America, including Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, Miami, Florida, and San Antonio, Texas. After 33 years and finally ending up in the best program director job I could have, running the biggest radio station in Miami, Florida, I was doing that for 9 years and got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Came on really strong, and it forced me out of the business. I spent about 8 years trying to figure out how to deal with the MS because it was attacking me pretty hard. The magic of modern science brought me a new medicine. My condition leveled off. I'm still in a wheelchair. My condition is the same. It's just has not gotten any worse. After 33 years of being on the radio, I had to kind of figure out what I was going to do with myself now that I wasn't concerned about the chronic disease as I had been for the 8 years prior. And I decided I wanted to tell a story about my career, about my diagnosis of MS. And so I wrote a memoir. Once I started on that, I began to really love writing. Actually, the memoir ended up number 11 on the Amazon General Broadcasting list. So it worked out really well for me. Good. But I hired a writing coach who critiqued everything I did. And she wanted me to begin listening. I'm an audiobook guy. I don't read. I listen to audiobooks. She wanted me to get deeper into the style of Stephen King and Clive Barker and people like that. I was in the middle of a Stephen King thing. I was reading, it's called, I've got it right here, Just After Sunset. And suddenly this whole thing came to me. I was a high school radio broadcaster. My dad was on the only radio station in my hometown in Canyon City, Colorado. They needed someone to run the God Show on Sunday mornings. They ran the recorded broadcast from the prior work of the God shows from church. Nobody wanted to do that, so they hired a high school kid. Well, that got me into the radio business. And then my career flourished. But I kept coming home to visit my parents. And during the process of visiting my parents, my dad would say things like, I can't believe they got rid of Bill Kafka to bring in some syndicated program, because my dad was an old school radio guy. He was a guy who believed that everybody from the radio station in that town should be from that town. And slowly but surely, each person got dismissed. And I would hear him be angry about this happening. And then all of a sudden, I kind of combined that with the Fairness Doctrine being rescinded in 1986, 87. And I came up with this story about what happened to a small American town and its only radio station after Ronald Reagan rescinded the Fairness Doctrine in 1987. So that's where the book came from. And it was just boom, it just came to me. Just one of those things.
That's really brilliant to be thinking through that. So let's do a little history check. Tell me, when was the Fairness Doctrine implemented and why was it implemented?
I'm going to kind of go over some, because I've been in this for a few years now. I'm going to just kind of give you some facts here. It has roots all the way back to the 1927 Radio Act, which limited radio broadcasting to licensed broadcasters, and it mandated the licensees serve the public interest. I want you to remember that phrase, the public interest. Now, the FCC was officially created in 1934, and it produced what they call the Communications Act. That was to encourage more effective use of radio in the public interest. Once again, a very important phrase. Now, the act reiterated that licensees were required to give fair and balanced reporting of controversial issues that mattered to their hometowns. The Communications Act said if your name came up in an editorial or if someone unfairly attacked you verbally on the air, you had the right to require equal time to reply to that attack. As time goes on, 1949, the commission released a report that interpreted the public interest phrase as a mandate to provide basic fairness and balance in reporting. There's repeated reference of fair and balanced reporting of the issues in the texts that I read. Now, then in 1959, part of the Fairness Doctrine became law when Congress decided to require equal time for people running for office. It all seemed like a fair position, but there were always detractors. Now, this is where the story gets a little murky. In 1969, a radio station in Pennsylvania ran an editorial depicting a writer as a communist sympathizer. Now, that man had the right under the Fairness Doctrine to demand equal time to defend himself against these allegations. The radio station denied that request. They took away his right of free speech guaranteed in the First Amendment. Now, the FCC ruled that they had violated the doctrine. They didn't let him talk. The Red Lion Broadcasting Company, which owned the radio station, sued all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled in the FCC's favor. Now, here's where politics gets involved. Now, Ronald Reagan was inaugurated in 1981, which began the FCC's shift from the public interest to the market interest. It began with the broadcasters of the day, got to Reagan and kept telling him that the equal time rule was affecting their bottom line, and they wanted it gone. Forget what the public wants. Let's take care of corporate America. In 1981, the phrase "in the public interest" became no more. What mattered to Reagan was the corporate world. Again, here's where it gets a little shifty. Reagan's position was that the Fairness Doctrine was contrary to the rights guaranteed in the First Amendment, the right of free speech. Now remember, the Supreme Court had already ruled the radio station in Pennsylvania had taken the writer's right of free speech away when they didn't let him have equal time. So when Reagan rescinded the Fairness Doctrine, he took away my right, your right of free speech, because you can no longer get equal time for a contrasting point of view. Reagan did the Jedi mind trick. The doctrine disappeared because of Reagan's political gobbledygook. He was saying, well, it's antagonistic to the First Amendment, but in reality, he took our rights away. But then it gets even worse after that. And here's what happens next. The editorial and personal attack provisions remained in effect so politicians could get equal time, but that was dropped in 2000. From then until 2011, more than 80 different rules that were implemented under the doctrine to maintain control of American broadcast airwaves were all repealed by the Federal Communications Commission. They have absolutely no concern anymore about the public interest. And now there's something called the CDA 230, or the Communications Decency Act provision, number 230. It says that no provider or user of an interactive computer shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. In other words, the corporate office is not responsible for the words that the broadcasters put out. And that's kind of this whole story here. That's why this is all a story that to me continues to linger, because all of the division we have now is because the doctrine's been gone. Hannity and Rush Limbaugh have been able to spew all their lies without anybody coming in and giving their contrary point of view. So it's a real issue. And I think, in fact, you can even see now in the congressional records, some people are even trying to bring the thing back. But there's a real hard fight from the Republican side to not do it. So,
well, wouldn't it be awfully difficult, given the explosion of the internet and social media, to really regulate that the way it was back in the day, when it was fairly easy to regulate what was on the airwaves, on TV and radio?
Well, let me say this. Canada, their version of the Fairness Doctrine is Section 1.1, subsection 3 of the Canadian Broadcasting Act of 1986. And it specifically specifies the licensee shall not broadcast false or misleading news. Now, the licensee, the people that actually own the building, the license are the ones that should be responsible. It shouldn't be that hard to turn that back around to make them responsible. In fact, there was a part somewhere around 2000 when the Canadian broadcasting people decided to look at the rule the way they have it, the way it's written. A licensee shall not broadcast false or misleading news. Somewhere around 2000, the Canadian Radio and Television Commission decided to look at the rule to see if it needed to be amended. But it sat there for 10 years. Nobody did anything. And then suddenly they were commanded by somebody upstairs to come up with a new rule. And then they said that any news that the licensee knows to be false or misleading and that endangers or is likely to endanger the lives, health, or safety of the public. That's how they ruled at that point. In other words, the licensee would still be responsible if he knew it was misleading information. So they're covered. All they had to do was say, no, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about it.
Right.
So that's how they did that. But that sat for a while, and people wanted to know why suddenly after 10 years that rule set and nobody talked about it. Well, at the time, there was a conservative network, TV network, that what they wanted to start called Sun TV. And somebody wanted Sun TV to be on. And so the commission looked at this and finally decided that they were not going to change the rules. So the Canadian Radio Television Commission decided to keep it the way it is. Right now in Canada, it says a licensee shall not broadcast false or misleading news. The licensee is responsible. That's what the important part, because once the licensee realizes they can't have people on their broadcast station spewing lies because they're going to be fined over and over again, they'll just eliminate them, and you won't have these agents provocateurs.
So you think that's the type of law we should have in the United States, I gather?
Well, somebody has to be responsible. I mean, as I said, there was a time in America when broadcasters served the public interest, and then it all shifted over to the corporations. Right. Well, if the corporations, they've taken away our right of free speech.
Yeah.
So, I think the other way you could maybe look at this, these rules were written for broadcast airwaves. Right. So at least if you put the rule back in specifically on broadcast airwaves, if a transmitter broadcasted to an antenna, if it was a TV or radio station that had a transmitter in the area broadcasted to an antenna, at least people would then know that they have a place to go, a refuge where they could know that there were somebody here giving equal time for contrasting points of view. And yes, those things could still end up on cable TV. You could still have Channel 10 on your satellite, but you would know that Channel 10 is that one place amongst the channels around it that would give equal time for contrasting points of view. So, there's a variety of different ways to debate it. Some people think it could work. Some people don't. If Canada can say the licensee is responsible, America can say the licensee is responsible. They took it away from us.
Seems like that's the reasonable thing to do and the fair thing to do. Speaking of fairness, yes. That would, of course, deal with things like Fox News and Breitbart. And, well, I don't know about Breitbart, but it would deal with Fox News and cable stations, right? Are you talking? Those would cover cable stations as well,
sure.
Right?
Well, again, the licensee, whoever is responsible, it's the licensee,
right?
And that would be the deal. And
would you want to see something like that? I mean, how do you deal with, for example, this podcast? I mean, this podcast is just me. I don't have any corporation. I can pretty much say whatever I feel like saying on this podcast. Yeah. Now, are you suggesting there should be some kind of equal time provisions for entities like this? That's what
there's a definite debate, and you're absolutely correct. But I think you're talking about two different things.
Probably.
Remember, you're talking about news and commentary.
Right.
If you apply the Fairness Doctrine to news and commentary, this is not news, it's commentary.
Right.
But then if somebody doesn't like it, that gives you another guest.
That's true, but I'm not obligated to
No.
bring them on. I mean, I'm not obligated, although I would want to.
Yeah.
I would want to, because
Of course you would. You bet.
the more controversy I can generate, the more clicks I get, more
Yep.
people listen to it, and the more ads I can sell.
Yep.
Oh, it's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's absolutely, it would be very difficult to figure out how to deal with this.
Yeah.
However, they have podcasts in Canada.
Sure.
I mean, it's already been done. Let's go check out the way they did it, and let's do it here. Because Canada does not have the division that we have in this country. It does not. And it's the simple reason that the Fairness Doctrine was rescinded.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that there are other factors involved that maybe are related?
I hate to. Here's something that really, because I'm a writer.
Why'd you laugh when I asked you that question?
Because I'm constantly thinking up plots and stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought one time it crossed my mind. I thought, suppose someone has figured out that you can't prove the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And suppose if we have the Fairness Doctrine, everybody gets in a whole bunch of mess. So if you get rid of the doctrine, you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
So as I'm thinking plots, I thought, well, wait a minute, that would almost make a plot. Suppose Reagan, for some reason, was told that if he doesn't get rid of it, there's going to be a big push from somewhere else saying the Bible's not true and you've got to get it off TV, you got to get it off radio.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just, another book I could have written.
Well, I mean, okay, maybe the fact that the Fairness Doctrine went away has helped to generate or make possible this splurge of crazy fanatic commentary and purported news from various cable outlets. I think that's probably contributed to the ability of people like Trump to spew out all the bullshit that he's been spewing out, and people like Hannity and his ilk to echo it and to build on it. And we end up with people like QAnon Marjorie in Congress, who just raised $3 million for crying out loud in their first quarter.
That's all these people want. They want money and they want the fame. They're not there to try to run our country. For God's sakes, people have voted these people into office. And now we'll say a minority people, because people don't vote. I believe that all these people got voted into office by the minorities in their places because the majority didn't vote. We've got to get people off their butts to vote to keep these people out. This is still a democracy. You still vote people in and out.
Wow.
So,
Kim, you're absolutely right. What do you think about this raft of restrictive bills that are being proposed and some states are enacting to restrict voting, to make it harder? For crying out loud, Georgia's law, you can't even give somebody a bottle of water while they're standing in line.
Well, they're putting these votes up because people got out. They're putting these restrictions up because people went out and voted.
Well, yeah.
That's the simple reason.
People they didn't want to come out to vote.
And they're trying to stop them all from voting.
Exactly.
Which is why even today, I saw a story that 100 corporations had gotten together to talk about this.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
Because I think the corporations don't mind if people vote.
Remember, what? I saw a piece in the Washington Post this morning. It was a commentary or an opinion piece suggesting that, wow, it's a great thing that these corporations are doing that they're stepping up. but it's not all a civics lesson. I mean, it's bottom line. The reason it's bottom line is because of the changing demographics, that the new majority is going to be people of color. And that if you look at TV ads today, this point was made. If you look at TV ads today, you see mixed race couples, you see you see gay people, you see a whole variety, a melting pot of people advertising products, one product after another. And corporations, this writer said, and I think I agree with her, are realizing that if they are seen as supporting this effort to hold down voter participation from this emerging customer base, that they're going to be as screwed as the Republican Party is.
I've heard since Ronald Reagan was president that the minority was going to become the majority. The minority was going to become the majority. I've heard that over and over again.
Yeah.
America was set up by Ronald Reagan. The last 30 years of America, has it been 30? Yeah, is the Ronald Reagan America. He set that up for white people.
Yeah.
Those days are over. And all the white people are panicking now because guess what? The minority has now become the majority, and they better stop it.
Well, here we are, two white guys talking about this.
Well, you know, I'm 66 years old as of 4/20.
Yeah.
I'm an old guy, and I look back and I think to myself, what happened? How come I was at one of the first Earth Days? How come we didn't pay attention?
Yeah.
I was there when they signed the Civil Rights Act of 1965. Why are they trying to turn it back around 50 years later? These are things that, as a 65-year-old man, these pisses me off.
Well, let me tell you something. I'm 78, and it pisses me off no end. I got to tell you. I mean, I covered the Democratic Convention in Chicago for United Press International.
My Lord.
Yeah. And I was there covering politics, covering the election the night that Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated.
Oh, man.
And I was with Martin Luther King 1 week before he was assassinated. So, live in history. These kids today don't have a clue, in my opinion. I mean, they're more worried about, I don't want to get off on that.
Well, I believe in George Carlin. George Carlin says those corporations, they don't want kids to know. The Republican Party has basically taken education away from kids over the last 30 years. It is not the same school that I went to when I was in high school. Yeah. We learned civics. We learned the process. They don't learn the process anymore because
I know that. You know, I was on a podcast with somebody. It was right after the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. And I said, didn't these people go to civics class? And the guy was like a 38-year-old. He had a PhD, pretty smart guy. He said, oh, they don't have civics class anymore. I didn't have civics class. What? You mean to tell me? I mean, what I couldn't understand was, how is it that so many people believed that the vice president of the United States could wave a magic wand and the election would be null and void?
You went to school with these guys. I went to school with these guys. I could tell you who they are. They grew up. The guys in my high school class grew up and were probably there. Yeah,
I know.
I can tell who they are.
Yeah, I know. Listen, you know what? This has been a great conversation, but I want you to tell me a little bit about your book.
Well, first of all, Bob, this has been fun. I normally get people that want to talk about my radio career and my multiple sclerosis diagnosis. Rarely do I get to talk all about the Fairness Doctrine. But this book has spawned another book, which I'm meeting with publishers next week. This, what you've read here, the Fairness Doctrine, is a short story. I've now written a novel. It takes up where this book leaves off, but it gets very much more in depth of what the situation is and what happens and who's going to fix it.
Well, that sounds interesting. We'll be watching for that. So, but the book that we have been talking about is called
The Death of Fairness.
The Death of Fairness. And
all the information on the book is at krcurry.com.
Okay.
If you log on to krcurry.com, it's got all the information about all my books. And I've got some commentary, the same kind of things that you do, I do on my webpage. So
cool. And you have another book, Come Get Me Mother, I'm Through. What the hell is that?
As a young radio DJ, my name was Kim Curry. Of course, you can tell Kim Curry. But in the 70s, you didn't know anybody named Kim. That was a male.
That's right.
One of them.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you didn't call a guy Kim on the radio specifically, or in high school, they called me Casey, my initials. So when I got into radio, my first full-time job, I walked up to the front door and I opened the door and there was a receptionist with a big fat guy with curly hair behind him. And I said to her, hello, ma'am, I'm your new nighttime disc jockey. Remember, we're talking 1976. And I said, my name is Night Smoke. And the guy behind her said, well, if it isn't Kid Curry. And people used to kid me about Kid Curry when I was young because he was a made up Western gunfighter. And so I said, I don't like that name. And he says, well, then I won't sign your check. Kid Curry it is.
I see it's on your book too.
And there was only one Kid Curry on the radio in America from the time I started till I retired. So it was a good thing. But I did a feature at night on my radio show called Bed Check. And I would let kids call in. This is a good story. You need to hear this. Kids call in and I would let them make jokes about their high school friends or about their brother. But when I went to Washington, D.C., it became a political issue because I just pick up the phone and I'd say bed check. And then you'd hear somebody say something about, a political, something they didn't like about Reagan. And so instead of being little kids, it ended up being political. I started getting a call from a guy named Frank DeFramer. And Frank DeFramer would say, hey, I'm here in my office and the president was just here. He was listening to you on the bed check. And I was, come on, man. So I'd hang up on him. But then I stopped him one day and I said, who are you and why do you keep saying this? Well, his name was Frank DeFramer. He was the actual framer of portraits at the White House.
Wow.
And Ronald Reagan would come down to his office and listen to my radio show. So it was just a quirky little thing. So, but at the end of that feature, of the feature, I'd always say, come get me, mother. I'm through. At the end of my show. So that ends up being the title of the book. So.
I see that. That's cool. That's really cool.
And the story about the White House is actually in the book. It's a much more in-depth story.
Yeah.
But because of my multiple sclerosis, it's the time when I was at the White House and I had an exacerbation. But it's in the book. You'll have to get the book to hear the story.
All right. Okay.
Thanks.
So both of these books, do you have other books too?
Coming.
Okay. So you got two of them. You got two that we're talking about. The Fairness Doctrine, The Death of the Fairness Doctrine.
Yes. And
Come Get Me Mother, I'm Through. And both of those are available on Amazon.com.
Yes, sir.
All right.
And they're Audible books too.
That's awesome.
Yes.
How did you do the Audible books? I'm just curious.
Behind me is my recording studio.
Oh, so you did it yourself?
I did it myself.
Cool.
Yes, sir. And
I'll tell you what. You know what? Because I've done all these blogs, right? And I turn these blogs into podcasts, narrations.
Yes.
I wrote a book. It's called Hijacked Nation. Donald Trump's Attack on America's Greatness.
Okay.
All right. And it's in 2 volumes. It's so freaking long. It's in 2 volumes. And basically what it is it's a selection of my blogs, which I believe kind of show a contemporary history of a lot of the stuff that's gone down during the Trump administration. And somebody told me, I was talking to a book agent, and she said, "Why don't you consider doing audiobook with that?" And I thought, well, holy cow! I've already got the recordings because I've turned them into podcasts.
Huh.
So,
hey, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean,
you know
I'm
what? You could
thinking
weave
about
that in
doing
with very little narration, with you narrating, a little bit with a lot of your tape, a little bit of narration, a lot of your tape. I think you've got a thing there, man.
That's an idea, because I want to finish it up. I want to do a third volume with a different title, but it would be called the 4-letter word that saved the nation: vote.
Amen, brother.
And go through the various votes from the time of the election all the way through all of the challenges and everything that happened up until now, and all of the various votes that have taken place, including the impeachment vote, the failure of the Senate to convict, that vote, and so on, and talk about all of those votes and the implication going forward. And it's just a matter of finding the time to do that. But I want to do it in a little better format than just repeating the blogs.
Yeah.
So anyway,
but there's definitely a book there.
Well, good.
No doubt.
Kim, thank you. It's been great talking to you, my
It's been
friend.
a pleasure, Bob.
You know what? I one thing I admire. I mean, we didn't talk about your MS at all. We can do that if you want to. But what I admire is that you didn't let that stop you. You're doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
You're successful at it. You're having fun, and you're making a contribution. And I just love it.
Journalists and broadcasters, it's in the system. It's in the blood.
It is. You can't get rid of it, can you?
That's what we do, brother. That's what we do.
I know. You know what? People go to me, you're 78 years old. Why aren't you at the beach just relaxing? It's only, 3 miles from me, the freaking beach. I was there once last year. I'm too damn busy. I can't just go to the beach.
Good for you.
I got all this writing to do and these podcasts to do. Anyway.
There you go.
All right. I'll talk to you, Kim. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you for your time, sir. I appreciate it very much.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Sir.
Well, my thanks to Kim Curry for joining us today. It was a great conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So hang on for a minute. We're going to take a quick pause for a commercial. And right after that, I'll be back with a few closing comments. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. It'd be great if you'd follow NFN Radio News so you don't miss an episode. Just look for NFN Radio News at Spreaker.com and click on my big old ugly picture up in the right-hand corner. Check out notfakenews.biz too, where you'll find new material just about every day by some excellent writers with perspectives on a whole range of topics. You can sign up as a member at notfakenews.biz, and of course, it's all free. Also, let your friends know about this podcast and about notfakenews.biz. Our goal is to be informative and entertaining as we comment on the latest developments in the news with just a little lean to the left. And don't forget to check out Tempo in the Times. That's our new companion podcast with co-host Scott Raminger. Streaming right now on major podcast platforms is a great episode in which former New Jersey Governor Jim Florio makes his debut as a guest host, and the topic is the development of wind energy. We have a fascinating guest, so take a listen. To learn more and for easy access to all of these episodes, just visit tempointhetimes.com. Meanwhile, thanks for listening. This is Bob Gaddy signing off for NFN Radio News and notfakenews.biz.